Hello everyone, my name is Natalie and welcome to or back to my channel. As you can see in the title, I went for open heart surgery and I'm finally well enough to start filming again, and this video is going to be me talking about my experience with open heart surgery. Now, just to recap for anybody who may stumble across this video or haven't seen my previous video, I will leave that linked down below. But I have a condition called Noonan syndrome. With this condition comes chronic heart disease, and I have had to have open heart surgery to have a valve replaced and a valve repaired. Both of these valves were in the right side of my heart. I can't remember the names of those valves, but those are the two I had replaced. So the first time I went into hospital was in July. I went in, I stayed overnight, and on the morning of my operation, the operation actually had to be cancelled because they had an emergency in. So then they had to rearrange it. The second time, I was all ready. We were about to drive down to the hospital, and then I got a phone call saying an emergency had come in and that they would no longer be able to operate on me. Come to the third time, I had a bed, I went into hospital, and then the next morning I was told that the operation could go ahead. So for me, third time really was the charm. I have written down notes because obviously I was not really with it. My memories of that time are very vague, but also a lot happened while I was in hospital. And I just want to do a disclaimer, my experience is not going to be everybody's experience. What I'm about to tell you was kind of like the extreme end of what can happen, but it's not the norm. Even the doctors were surprised about a lot of stuff that I was dealing with. So please, if you're due for open heart surgery or a member of your family is, don't be scared. And please don't think that my experience is the one and only and everything that happened to me is going to happen. It's not. Usually they tell you this could happen, or this could happen, or this could happen. For me, it was more this happened, and this happened, and this happened. So my experience was extreme. My operation was done via NHS. All the doctors, surgeons and nurses I had were absolutely incredible. They were the nicest people. They were so comforting, so nurturing, that it made my experience so much better because the nurses I had really were amazing. I was also in a room with 3 other people, and those other people were also incredible. They were all much older than me, and they were so kind. And even though my experience wasn't lovely, it was lovely to be surrounded by those people. So just to give again a bit of a background story, this is my 3rd heart surgery. When I was younger, I had keyhole surgery, basically like stretch a valve because one of my valves was too narrow. This failed. I then had to go for open heart surgery when I was around a year and a half, maybe 2. I'm not sure about the exact timing of that. And this is where they split the valve, and so I could get oxygen air for it. And then this 3rd time I had to have the valve replaced that they'd split open because obviously it's an open valve, it needed to get sorted, and I had to have another valve repaired because what happened was my heart was filling with blood from this leaky valve, and my heart was stretching, and that stretching had started to damage the other valve. Also, probably should have warned, some of this information may be a bit graphic, so if you're uncomfortable or squeamish, it might not be the best video to watch. I should have said that before, I'm so sorry. To start from the beginning, my surgery was thought to take about 4 hours, 4.5 hours. It didn't. My surgery actually ended up being 7 hours long, which they weren't expecting. What they said was, because I had a previous heart surgery, basically what they were doing is they were just, instead of opening the chest up, they were reopening my previous scar, my previous wound. And the way they phrased it was things were a bit more stuck together than we thought it would be. So it was the first challenge. once I was actually out of surgery, I had excess bleeding and they were having to monitor that because if the bleeding had continued, I would have had to go back in for surgery. Luckily it didn't, the bleeding stopped, and I was then, you know, able to be awoken and start my recovery. My stay in hospital again was a bit longer than I thought. I was meant to be in hospital for 5 days. I ended up being in the hospital for a total of 12 because of all the other complications that came with it. Again, I'm just going to reiterate, my issues with the open heart surgery wasn't actually with the surgery. The surgery went really well. The surgeons were so pleased with it. It's just a lot of stuff happened to me afterwards that was nothing to do with the surgery itself that caused issue. During heart surgery, I actually had to end up having 2 blood transfusions. And then when I was on the hospital ward, because of some of the other things going on, they had to give me a 3rd transfusion, which honestly I was more annoyed about because by the time they had the blood for my transfusion, it was like 11:30 at night, and so I had to stay awake and I had to have this transfusion like done through the night. And I kept dozing off to sleep, but then obviously they kept having to check on me, and every time they checked on me they had to wake me up. So it was a very disruptful night that night. The blood transfusion did make me feel quite ill, but it wasn't too bad. Once the actual transfusion was finished, I was absolutely fine, but just in the process I felt a bit sick and a bit pale. I think one of the other patients called me because she got a bit panicked because she saw how pale I was. The other thing that happened is I got incredibly physically sick. I was throwing up a lot, I couldn't keep food down, and I wasn't actually able to keep any food down for about 10 days. So I kind of went 10 days without food. They did put me on drips throughout this time because they saw I couldn't get anything in my body and I kept throwing up. So that wasn't pleasant. This was more because my body was under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and it just couldn't cope with, it just got too much for my body basically. The second reason is that because my body is very clean, so I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, and I drink very little alcohol, my body's seen as what they call clean, which means that the cleaner your body is, the worse effect morphine can have on you. Morphine, because your body's not used to that kind of substance, you can get very sick from morphine, and that's what happened to me. I got very sick with the morphine and with the other drugs. Even though they work to take away the pain, they did make me sick. But that was kind of unsurprising because my mum had told the doctors that when the first time I'd gone and I'd had morphine when I was a child, I got very, very sick with morphine then as well. So it was more kind of expected, but it was definitely like about 10 days where I just had constant sickness and I couldn't keep any food down. For about 11 days in total, I was also on a nebulizer and oxygen masks because my body needed the extra oxygen. I was also attached to a lot of monitors to monitor my heart rate, my oxygen level, and my oxygen level wasn't as high as they liked it to be, so they put me on a nebulizer and they put me on oxygen. So if you've seen on TV, I did have the thing that goes up the nose and connects. So again, if you've watched any Dr. Bones, you'll see. One thing they don't show you on TV though is just a little warning, if just to be prepared for, is that because they sit up your nose, it does block your nose and it can lead to you having a very blocked nose, very congested nose. Also, depending on how sensitive the inside of your nose is, depending on how like big your nostrils are, it can rub on the inside, and for me it rubbed and it caused bleeding. So I had nosebleeds a lot because of this particular oxygen mask, which does happen. It's not an unusual thing to happen, but it is a thing just to be wary of, that it could happen to you. So if you are needing to go in, maybe take some, I don't know, soothing cream or something just for the inside of your nose, just to try and heal it, or maybe seek some doctor's advice beforehand of the best ways to cope with this. Obviously I didn't, because I was unaware and I didn't think to ask anything like that, so that might be something to just bring up. Now let's move on to when you have open heart surgery. You have 2 drains inserted, like, hold on, I'll see if I can stand up. 2 drains inserted just here. So the day after I woke up from surgery was when those drains were removed. It's as unpleasant as it sounds. Basically, you just have to make sure, and your doctors will talk you through this, you just have to make sure you hold your breath while they're taking it out, and it is the weirdest sensation ever. It feels like what it is. You know when you have a tube in a hole and you pull that tube out and you hear the noise and you kind of feel the sensation a bit of the tube being pulled out? Exactly what it is. It's fairly pain-free, but when they do this, you have to remember that you will still be on a lot of pain medication. So you won't feel it, you just have to make sure that you do as you're instructed, hold your breath while they yank it out. So I had 2, and so they yanked, thankfully they yanked them out at the same time. So I had one nurse on this side, one nurse on this side, and they pulled them out at the same time. So yeah, it was weird, it was unpleasant, but yeah. I also, obviously, because I had a catheter inserted, and this was removed about 3-4 days after surgery, and again it's as equally as unpleasant a situation where they yank out. I will say, both for the tubes and for the catheter, it is very quick. So as weird and kind of like squirmy as it feels, it is done very quickly and they just yank it out. But it did mean that I had a catheter bag, and it's weird because when you are peeing you don't notice it. I thought for sure it would feel so weird because I'd feel that I'm peeing and that it would just feel wrong. I didn't. I don't know if it was the amount of medication I was on and the fact I was having so many other issues, but I didn't notice when I was peeing. So the catheter, you really can't tell, and it doesn't feel that weird. Obviously when you're laying in bed you do have to be wary and stuff because this tube is coming out of you. But yeah, the actual act of having a catheter in me wasn't that bad, but taking it out was quick, but it was a bit uncomfortable. Let's get on to the kind of scarier aspect of what happened. So I was about 3-4 days out of surgery. It happened during the night. I was escorted to the bathroom by one of the nurses. She left me in there. I was sat down and I suddenly started feeling really unwell. I started feeling very hot and I started, like, my vision started going. So I yanked on the emergency puller that they have in there and I collapsed. And the door, I remember the door opening and then I collapsed. I went, like, it was black. I was taken back to I woke up a little bit while I was in the chair. I don't remember this, but this is what they told me. I then collapsed again, and then when I woke up I was on the bed with about 8 nurses surrounding me. This happened twice. So this happened, and then the next night I again was escorted to the bathroom. I got up, the nurse, I remember this distinctly, the nurse said to me, "Can you walk or do you need a chair?" And I took a couple of steps and I said, "I think I need a chair." And then as soon as I said that, I blacked out and I collapsed. And again, I woke up on the floor with like 8 nurses surrounding me. Yeah, that happened. But that isn't so much to do with the heart surgery and with what happened. My body, I have this thing, I can't remember what it's called, annoyingly, because I always call it the wrong name, so I'm not going to try here. But it's where, when my body gets under so much pressure, instead of like my brain regulate it, it just shuts down. And that's what was happening. I was having so many doctor's visits, I was having so much medication, there was so much stimulus going on, and there was so many people kept asking me questions, and basically it all got too much because I never had a day where I was just allowed to rest. I was always having visits from doctors and nurses. I was in there for 12 days. I had my blood taken multiple times a day for those entire 12 days. My body just couldn't take it, and that's why I kept collapsing. That is more of a me thing than a thing to do with the heart surgery and what was going on. It was just the fact that I've got this other thing and my body just likes to shut, my brain just likes to shut down when I can't cope with things. So yeah, that was the main thing. And then because of that and because I kept collapsing, I was put on bed rest and I had to use a bedpan for, I think it was like the 8th or 9th day I was in there that I was then allowed to try walking again with assistance and going to the bathroom on my own. But yeah, for about 4 days I was on complete bed rest and I had to use a bedpan and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I mentioned earlier that I was on monitors. At one point my heart rate was at 150, which, if you know, a normal heart rate should be between 60 and 100. Mine was at 150, occasionally it reached like 160, which is why I was being constantly monitored. It's why I still had all these machines attached to me, because my heart rate was so high. After heart surgery, your heart does take time to balance it out. But yeah, they were concerned with the fact that my heart rate didn't seem to be going down. It did eventually go down, but it went down gradually. So for instance, I went down to like around 140 mark, then like 120 mark, and eventually it did come down to a level that it should have been. But yeah, for a good few days my heart rate was at 150, which is not good. That's not what it should be. So yeah, that happened as well. Okay, I've just looked at my notes, and one of the more unpleasant things that happened, yes, I know I've said a lot of unpleasant things, but this one was, I'd argue, the worst thing. I ended up having fluid on the right side of my lung. So in order to do that, I had to go down and have a procedure, and they had to insert a drain into my back to get to my lung so they could drain the fluid out. The procedure itself was very quick. I was awake for it. It wasn't that bad. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but it felt fine. Cut to me going back up to the ward I was on. My mum was there. We were chatting. After about, I think, 5-10 minutes, it started to get a bit uncomfortable, so I took the paracetamol I was given, and then the pain just kept increasing, and it got so bad that I was almost in tears from the pain. It was more because every time I breathed it hurt, because it was connected to my lung. Every time I breathed it was obviously rubbing against my insides and it hurt. So that's why it more panics me, because I felt like I couldn't breathe because of the pain. They ended up giving me ibuprofen. That didn't do anything. They gave me morphine, and then they gave me this one other drug. I can't remember what it is. It begins with an O. It's like morphine, but not morphine. And after 45 minutes of pain, these 4 drugs eventually kicked in, and the relief I felt when the pain wasn't there was insane. I ended up having this drain attached for about 48 hours. And so when it's fully in there, you can sit up, you can lean back, you can do things. You just have to get the nurses to check, see if it kinks. But other than that, you're good. So yeah, I'd argue that's the worst thing that happened. That was the most painful thing. Alongside having fluid on my chest, I also got pneumonia and a chest infection. So I also had to be on antibiotics to combat those 2 things. Again, a few days and I was absolutely fine. Luckily they caught it in time that it didn't progress to anything bad. But yeah, I also had pneumonia and a chest infection while I was in the hospital. The only other 2 things that happened was I had a very high temperature. Like my temperature, I don't know what it is converted into American. Sorry about that, my camera battery died and I had to recharge it. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, I'm not sure what it is converted into the American temperature system, but my temperature was around 38 or 39 degrees, which isn't good, but again, with antibiotics and with medication, that all came down. Only other thing which happened while I was in hospital is constipation. I'm going to be completely honest with you and real here. Constipation. I didn't go to the bathroom like that for about 11 days, and on the 11th day I only went because I had to have a suppository, which again isn't pleasant, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. And unfortunately they did try to give me like medicine to try and shift it, but the medicines they were giving me didn't react well with me. Again, this was something else I was throwing up, was the medication. In fact, there was a certain medication they used which was a drink, and it smelled like Fanta, and now I cannot stand the smell of Fanta. I wouldn't be able to drink it. It has really just triggered me for that, and I'm off it for life now. I will say one thing though, once I did get back home, a lot of things did sort themselves out. So the constipation sorted itself out. I was on a lot of medications when I came out, so one thing that didn't help for constipation as well was I was on iron tablets 3 times a day. If you've ever taken iron tablets, you will know they do mess up your gut. So the medications I was on when I came out of hospital was ibuprofen and paracetamol, which were actually prescribed to me. I had to take them about 8 times a day, so I would have 2 each time. So when I'd have it, I'd have paracetamol and ibuprofen together, and I'd have 4 tablets. So I'd have 2 ibuprofen and 2 paracetamol, which is completely normal when you come out and you're in that amount of pain. That is completely okay. What we did then was we just reduced me down so that eventually I was on it for like 4 times a day, then 2 times a day, and now it's like 6 months since my surgery, 7 months since my surgery, and I'm not on any pain medications at all. I'm all sorted, I'm all fine. But I will say, once I did get home, so many things picked up. I was in a better environment, and I'm lucky enough that my mum was incredible. She was here every day, she was looking after me. So I am very, very lucky in that regard that I had people taking care of me, and I had family members taking very good care of me. The only other thing I had ongoing after I came home was, again, chest pain. My right side was in a lot more pain, as was my back, mainly because of the drain that was put in, so that did increase the pain a lot and the length of time that it took to heal. But like I said, I'm here now, I'm all recovered, I'm back into the swing of things. Yeah, I think that's my whole story. There's probably a lot of stuff that I've missed out, and if I do start remembering that stuff, I'll be sure to do a future video discussing it. But other than that, yeah, the only thing that's left is this scar here, which is healing really well. It's already starting to fade a little bit. Okay everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions, then please leave them down in the comments below. If there's enough, I'll do like a Q&A video. If not, I'll just answer them in the comments. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.